I think this is an amazing film and really interesting. I think it's politically bullshit.
Oh, yes, of course, because there's a bunch of closed-minded racist morons that represent people in the seats of power.
So this is part of that conversation of like the imagined American working class that we've been doing for decades now.
These are Bollywood musicals. They just don't have dance numbers because Hollywood doesn't have the balls to just, put in a dance number. And if you can direct an action sequence, you can direct a dance sequence.
It's 5 fucking stars. It's absolutely unbelievably beautiful and amazing. And it is total propaganda for the Cuban Revolution. I don't think anymore that you can avoid fighting inside and outside of the state at the same time. I think there may be multiple ways to do that. I don't think electoral politics is the only way to do that.
Yeah, but some shit's got to get burned down too, so...
Right.
Honestly, it kind of warms my heart that somebody out there was thinking that the Watermelon Woman was a threat to, white, hetero, cis, Christian culture.
I know we're saying that this isn't technically like a good movie, but a movie with surprisingly good elements and a really fucked up package.
This ending, you have good characters that are entirely powerless against the unstoppable evil capitalists.
Mm-hmm. Only after Avengers did Marvel movies start doing as well as Ghost.
Right.
Starring Patrick Swayze, Demi Moore, and some very phallic clay.
Did the word pornography ever enter your mind when you were watching this film, Isaac?
Nope.
And I think it has the politics of cinema stamp of approval. If you want to use this as a first date movie, go for it.
It seemed to have worked out for my folks. Fuck capitalism. Fuck all of this stuff.
Welcome all to the politics of cinema. On this show, we believe films are never neutral. There's a political as well as an artistic message captured in every film, in every country, and in every time period. And our job is to be on the lookout for all of it. My name is Aaron Spears.
My name is Isaac Miller. And on this episode, we're doing a second installment of our Japanese noir, really Japanese 60s noir series. So apologies. I think we mentioned this last episode, but I am on strike. I am still on strike in the UC university system in California, the biggest higher education strike in the history of the U.S. at least. And turns out that being on strike and being on the picket line is actually a lot more work than your normal work and barely holding it together here. So things are a little bit delayed. So I apologize for that to both you and Aaron, you, the listeners.
Well, it can always be Noirvember in our hearts.
It's true. Does noir ever leave our hearts? I don't think so.
We wanted to go back to Japanese noir like we mentioned on our previous episode because it's something we both have just been wanting to go back to because when we have dipped our toes in there, we're like, God damn, there's so many movies. Like, I watch one movie, I end up adding, or for every one movie I watch, there's like 5 I add to my watch list.
Right.
And we got to check some of these bad boys off. But we stuck with, for Noirvember this year, Yakuza Noir, very specifically within the Japanese film market. And also so specifically that looking at A Colt is My Passport from 1967 is one whole year after our previous episode, Tokyo Drifter from 67. No. I messed these up again, didn't I?
66. So Tokyo Drifter is 66.
That's what it was. Tokyo Drifter 66. I'm confusing myself with a note I have that we will get to in a moment about another film from 67. But yeah, so now we've got Takashi Nomura's Colt is My Passport. I guess starting real quick with Takashi, I can't find a ton of stuff about him.
He's not... He doesn't, and somebody who knows this period in Japanese film better than us, correct us, but he doesn't seem to have a lot of other big stuff.
Well, part of what doing research into the film, like I watched this one and didn't do any research ahead of time for it. I waited till I was done because I didn't want to accidentally read too much about it. Same thing I did with previous episode, Tokyo Drifter. I went to the Ritchie book I mentioned on the previous one, 100 Years of Japanese Cinema, and I went right to the index, and there's no Takashi Nomura in there.
Brutal.
But what limited stuff I could find, some comments on reviews of pretty much A Colt is My Passport, we're referencing how he didn't find maybe not immediate because he's got a dozen or so films here, but he wasn't finding the success, I guess, financially with his films to really keep his career going as a filmmaker, and he switched to a lot of Japanese television, which I'm not as interested in. I'm interested in their films, but So yeah, he did some films, and he did a number of films, and he went into Japanese television, and that's about all I was able to dig up on him.
Mm,
I was also trying to check out, as we mentioned on previous episode with Tokyo Drifter, like when were these Yakuza Noir films seen by eyeballs here in America?
mm,
And a lot of some of the reviews I was finding that were actually mentioning this were reviews of when it originally came out on when Cold as My Passport was first put out on DVD.
right. With this,
So it really was one of those. I think it was a partnership with Criterion and Janus Films
mm,
did a box set that was all Nikatsu Noir films. So the studio that Nomura and um,
Suzuki.
previous topic
Yeah.
Tokyo Drifter, Suzuki were both working at the same place. So Cold as My Passport was part of that box set, and that's when people were like, "Holy shit, this movie!" Or I was saying, "Holy shit, this movie." I don't know that was the reaction when it first came out. It was probably the least known of the ones in that box set.
And now I think people I mean, this movie rules.
Yeah, yeah,
This is,
100%.
I mean, you can feel so much of it. I mean, one, it jars, it jars. Can you tell we're all tired? It stars Joe Shishido, and the man who got surgery on his cheeks to be even more distinctive. The
I was wondering about that.
Yeah, no, that was not his original face.
Interesting.
I mean, I think he's frankly one of the best tough guys in the history of cinema. He's fantastic.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you just feel it. He is that quiet competence that comes from him, and sort of just effortless sort of tough guyness. But I think with enough acting depth to do what's needed, especially in a noir, because the thing about a noir is there has to be sort of a tragic element to it, right? An element of loss, and he can bring that.
He can actually. For some reason my brain went when I was trying to think, like I was trying to compare him. I was like, man, he's just got that certain vibe. Like charm isn't really even a strong enough word to describe what he's got. His presence. He really reminded me, and I'm probably going to mispronounce it, but Zbigniew Chbosky from Ashes and Diamonds, just like that effortlessly like hip, cool kind of guy, or maybe more like even Lee Marvin, because he's more of like the quiet cool than like the I don't know, like a cool character from like a Tarantino movie who just can't shut the fuck up or anything. You know what I mean? Like it's just that quiet guy who knows exactly what he's doing and is very methodical.
So one, I have never seen Ashes and Diamonds. It's on my list. I feel ashamed. I know there's always a lot of movies we haven't seen, but that one especially. So I'm gonna say, like, yes, I put him up there with Lee Marvin, and I think there's certain similarities.
Mm.
I don't know if they use their physicality in the same way because they have very different sort of body types. But they do they have an effortless cool, and they look very different. There's a certain degree of the vibe that comes from them, but neither of them are classically handsome leads.
That's part of it too. Although Sigbert he's a pretty hot guy. Lee Marvin, I'm picturing more as like point blank, like elder hitman Lee Marvin. So
yeah,
I'm not at the point in my life yet where I would find Lee Marvin at that age attractive. Ask me in about 30 years.
Right, exactly.
You get there, but yeah, and it's something that I don't know. There's like that, I don't know, that kind of intangible element of just like why am I drawn to this guy? I mean, it's just, you know, he the way he carries himself, the way he behaves, the way he kind of maybe not even really dresses in this movie. I don't know. It's sort of like something I can't quite articulate, but just he grabs you. Like as soon as he's on screen, you're like, what is that guy doing? I'm following that guy.
You mean he's a movie star?
Well, that's it. Yeah.
And I don't mean that in like a simple way. I mean, there are people who he's one of those people who grabs you, right? That's kind of what a movie star is, like at a deeper level, is just that pure presence. Which doesn't always mean they're actually great actors, but I think in this case he can be quite good.
Well, I've only seen him in two things so far, and he's phenomenal in both, which actually was what I was referencing at the top here, where the same year, 1967, for Colt as My Passport, he's also the star of previous movie we've covered, Suzuki's Branded to Kill, also in 67.
Which is also a noir, and also involves him being a hitman. But
feels very different to me.
Well, they're very different. Both of them are playing with style, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and we can get into this. I mean, this is a spaghetti Western, right? It's a noir very clearly, but it is very much a spaghetti Western.
It's also a total French New Wave gangster movie
Yes.
at the same time.
So, so in some ways, they're both imbibing a lot of the same influences, both movies. But this one, I think, stays to being a little bit more traditional, right? Stylistically. The other one is more new wave, and this one is more spaghetti, maybe.
I mean, this one's definitely more like there's new wave vibes in both of them. I think this one has a stronger, not that I'm ranking between that and new wave, but this has a stronger spaghetti Western vibe than Tokyo Drifter. But I feel like this one's kind of a mix. I think it's why I responded to this one a bit more than Tokyo Drifter, because it tickles a lot of like film geek, I don't know, instincts in me, where I was like, ooh, that's a total spaghetti Western zoom. Oh, that the sound, like the whistling, or I guess maybe it's a harmonica in this one, kind of sounds like that Ennio Morricone spaghetti Western kind of music. But then there's also jump cuts, and I feel like the kind of lightness to the romantic subplot that goes on here has more like new wave vibes.
Right. I mean, in some ways, I mean, in terms of the French New Wave, I'm pretty weak. Am I a good film person? I don't know. I think I'm just going to go watch another DTV action movie at this point. This is what Grad School's done to me. But I mean, for me, it's picking up on. So yes, I mean, I think the way the camera is used, the interestingness of the shots certainly, and then the deep spaghetti Western vibe, but with a very clear noir arc.
Right.
For everybody, right? The desperation of escape and regret and attachment and entrapment by attachment. The sort of and the other thing about a noir is that noirs tend to be crises of relations between agency and structure, right? Between characters. So the character, most noirs are about somebody struggling against the structural constraints that they face in life.
Indeed.
And this is a movie that has that. I know we're being pretty vague so far.
How about this for vague? The description for Colt is My Passport, plot-wise, is a gang lord hires Kamimura, Joe Shishido's character, a hitman, to take out a rival boss who's gotten greedy.
So nothing. Okay. So
well, I mean, that's the opening scene.
That is the opening scene. Yes.
Maybe what, like 15 minutes or so?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's pretty twisty. But basically, Joe Shishido plays Suji Kimimura. He's a hitman with a basically with a
partner.
With a sidekick. I mean, he's a partner. He's actually a sidekick. Like, and he's sort of identified he's sort of identified as young, right? As a kid.
Yeah, it's like his what do you call it? Like a protege.
It's his protege.
Yeah, he's got to learn the ways of the hitman by hanging out with Kamimura.
And he's played by Joe Fujio.
Jerry.
Oh, sorry, Jerry. Gosh.
A Japanese Yakuza Noir starring Joe and Jerry.
Joe and Jerry, right?
Yeah.
Great. Who sort of, I mean, in a certain sense, I mean, a lot of the movie hits he does this job basically to get a rival Yakuza boss who's, I mean, they basically had business relations, and the particular deal doesn't really matter. And the guy gotten greedy, though it looks like he ices the guy like literally in front of the people who hired him, like the other crime bosses there, which is not.
I think it's like at his house, isn't it?
Yeah,
because the boss that orders the hit makes this big deal of like how he wants what is it? He has a phrase for it that I'm drawing a blank on now, but he he wants a big show of it. He's like, I want to make sure this guy is taken out. No two ways about it. He's like, all right, well, I'll off him in your house.
Right. Which he's clearly he's played as the ultimate expert, but this is also, it feels like a very rash choice, right?
It's I wrote it down as like he wants him to produce this confirmed kill. That was the phrase I was looking for.
Yeah.
So is it so it's technically in line with the instructions, but it's kind of like rubbing the boss's face in it, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it feels. This is
That's how
where
I feel.
I got a little confused. Is like, what is the dynamics here? He seems to be being, he is rubbing their face in it a little bit, and almost immediately that means he's on the run. First, because of the rival gang,
Right. Yeah. He took out the boss, but the rest of the gang, there's lieutenants, there's other people that are like, well, we got to go get this guy now.
right? And then, in which of course his employers, are going to get him out of the country. Which this is another thing that's a little unclear to me, and maybe I should have picked this up. Is his goal to get the whole? I mean, his desperate goal throughout a lot of this is to get out, right? And this is a very noirish sort of desire. And then there's another character, Mina, who's sort of the female lead who desperately wants to get out as well,
Mhm.
for her own sort of structural needs.
Ooh, hang on. She has this line about like how desperate she is to get out. She says, all that's left for me is dust and the smell of men and gasoline.
Oh, wow.
Oh man, yes. Get her out, please.
So she works. I mean, well, I'll just get to this. Basically, they're on the run, and they're sort of set up in this kind of in flop house on the harbor,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where she works. And she's had a relationship with one of the leaders of, I think, the other gang, one of the lieutenants in the other gang, who is controlling and will not let her out. And so she wants to get out of that, and she has connections to sort of the community of the communities of the people who run the ferries and boats, and it seems like she could actually go, but she doesn't do it. But those people are a little bit beyond the control of the Yakuza at this point. They're pretty tough. But basically, back to Toshishido's character. Basically, almost immediately, his employers sell him out. They don't really say that's what they're doing. I mean, it's sort of behind his back at first, but they, basically the rival gang, for the price of the hitman, is willing to sort of renegotiate their arrangement.
Yeah, it's like they can make peace by like turning over Joe Shishido.
Yeah, which
Right.
Admittedly, he's just the hired instrument. Like, why are you doing this exactly? But that's it's sort of the
There's
play,
like a disposability to it, I think, as well.
right? I mean, that's our basic premise.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a constant fear and pressure in this movie, and in a lot of ways, Shishido is both trying to get out, and also trying to protect his protege, and also trying to deal with the fact that Mina's into him.
Right. But he seems kind of too cool for school here and is like, eh.
I mean, would he be a noir / Western hero if he wasn't?
No. It kind of has more, yeah, it has like kind of a Django vibe here where there's somebody who's interested, but I got all these guns and all this vengeance I got to go seek. Part of it too, though, and here's the spoilers if you haven't seen Cold as My Passport, at the end spoiled it all, but that's a good summary up until like that final act where Joe Shishido realizes that, okay, if they've already negotiated without any honor at all for me or what I've done for the organization, et cetera, he negotiates with the people that have come to kill him. All right, we'll leave my protege here alone.
Right.
Presumably also, Mina is exempt as well. And I'll meet you. You can have me, whatever. So he safely gets his protege like off on a boat, and he's in safe hands as we head to the climax.
Right. I mean, so part of what's interesting, I mean, the portrayal of masculinity here is interesting. It's very much he's a very classic, masculine figure, and it's an actor who is superb at doing that. Strong, silent, but also caring and tender toward his protege.
Yeah.
Toward
Jerry.
Toward Jerry. Well, Shun. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, and I think that I think that's interesting. He's someone who does have people that he cares about, and the mask that this sort of character holds isn't really. It's not up in regards to Jerry or Shun's character, right? And I think that's interesting. But of course, a noir hero needs that vulnerability. I think, once again, the political economy of this movie, if we're talking about sort of the politics of it, isn't particularly original. Capitalism is not great.
What?
The structural, I mean, but there's not like a deep cut on this. I mean, this is just sort of.
No.
I mean, I feel like every Yakuza movie is, did you know the Yakuza has a code? Absolutely. Oh, do they ever care about it? No. What are they?
It's so weird. Like I kind of was, that's what I was sort of getting into when we were talking about doing the Yakuza Noir. And I was like, oh, this could be interesting. Is this akin to, as we talked about in the last episode, like the mafia films post Godfather in America? Like there's a code here and everything. You're like, but so nobody gives a shit though?
I think every movie is them breaking it.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have drama if everybody just sticks to the code and you know exactly what's going to happen because there's a code here.
But nice if someone did.
I mean, someday, right?
Someday, some movie. Will a Yakuza actually stick to the... Well, I guess we watched a whole movie which was about somebody who's sticking to it last time. But...
Well, it was the individual, though, not the organization.
Right. It was the individual.
Here you have the individual, like we said, kind of sticking to it. The organization doesn't give a shit.
Right. I mean, the rest of them, they're like rapacious capitalists, basically.
Right. There's the metaphor.
I mean, I think really what it is the images of the docks, the images of the sailors. There's a texture to sort of a peripheral life in sort of 60s Japan.
Yeah.
A working class existence, but sort of peripheral to the overall system and the way criminal organizations sort of try to victimize and take over those sort of marginal spaces, like people who are on the dock.
And I was going to say the docks is a good example of that, but also Mina and her situation.
Yeah, well, I mean, Mina's actually the real
really depressing because she's just manhandled by everybody in this like restaurant / brothel / hotel or whatever. It's pretty clear she is just has a horrible existence, and it's immediately depressing just seeing like, oh God, like all the shit she has to put up with.
Well, right. I mean, I think, there's, the other side of gender in this is, she defends herself. I mean, she works in this bar or when she's working in the bar, that's part of the sort of hostel, whatever you want to call it, that she's in. They have respect for her, but in a certain level, but also constant sexual harassment, which she's able to deal with because she has to,
right.
But yeah, I mean, she's trapped by this, and she's trapped by the possessiveness of men because she's a Yakuza boss has decided that he owns her.
Yeah, when you said relationship earlier, I was like, I don't know if relationship's the right word.
Yeah, it's not even clear that
it is a type of a relationship, but it's gross.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even like she dated him and then he wouldn't let her go. It basically seems like he stormed in and just did it.
You're mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's, that's certainly, there. I mean, none of this is, so basically I'm trying to pull out the political elements of it. None of it's super deep in a certain sense. I mean, it is an image of sort of industrial working class existence in sort of 60s Japan. All of it sort of in a pretty classic noir mode.
Yeah, I'd say so. It's like we said on the last one too. Like these are not like labors of love. So I mean, I guess that could be. That's not fair. These are not like films like trying to think of like like the Paul Thomas Anderson example or something where like make a movie every 5 years, and it's like because you wanted that story and you took the time to craft it and like this was one of how many movies that Nikatsu put out this year, let alone like how many Yakuza movies they put out this year. Like it's just a constant churning of like, let's put this out. And like we mentioned on the last episode, though, I think those are interesting types of movies to look at within the scope of this show, because it's more like you're just shooting from the hip and what are you kind of accidentally capturing,
right?
Along with what you're trying to capture, politics and society and everything.
Right.
I have a question. So we were talking about Mina there for a second too, just to stick with her. Since we're in, noir territory, is she fit the bill of a femme fatale here? Because I feel like she checks a few boxes, but not maybe all of them for femme fatale.
Yeah, I mean, is she ever really duplicitous?
No, see, that's the part. She's almost the one that is like the vehicle for escape, because she knows the dock workers and she knows the right people to talk to get them to get Joe and Jerry smuggled out in a way to safety. And they even make mention about how like she almost sounds like she has a standing offer to just hop on a boat and get out herself, but she doesn't.
She
But now
does.
that there's someone to go with, she is interested in that.
Yeah. I mean, some level of human connection. I mean, but she does have connection. She has a standing offer because she's actually part of that community there, right?
Right, but she seems like she kind of portrays it as, or she verbalizes it as being like, but to go where?
Right.
You know what I mean? Or like not. I mean, there's a destination that's there and go across the bay or whatever. But
But
like,
what does that mean?
how would my lot in life be any different if I was like stuck in some shit brothel like over there versus here?
Right. So it takes another human connection, especially with a,
Yeah. Plus, now you got a suave, good-looking, hitman who seems like he's not exactly hurting for money. He's got custom-built cars just for one job, and caches of weapons he'll just toss away because he's done.
True.
Seems like he might be financially well. I don't know. He's not gonna be a hitman for much longer, I guess. But
Hey, you mean him? It's I'm sure trade that travels.
I was he could be, but this is not a I don't know. No characters here are really planning long term. I guess I would say.
Well, I mean, the long term is away. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's about it. Yeah.
So let's talk about the final showdown a little bit. I mean, this is the most spaghetti western this movie gets. And to be clear, the soundtrack is trying to be Morricone through the entirety.
Yeah, and I say pretty successfully.
Yeah, I mean, it's not Morricone by any means, but it works.
It's playing in that what do you call it? Like playing in that sandbox, and it works really well for this film, I think.
It works really well for this film. I mean, part of it is, we're sort of saying the way this is experimental. I mean, for movies that are just pumped out, like you're saying, there's these new wave influences, there's these spaghetti western influences. For movies that are just pumped out, I mean, this isn't a throwaway, right? And it's not an accidental quality film.
Oh no! I didn't mean to imply that.
Well, but I think that's what's interesting about it is it's from a director who we don't really have a lot of information on, and maybe all of his movies are great. Maybe he has more movies at this level, and we just don't even know. People just haven't watched them. But here's this movie that it takes effort to do what's done here, and you wonder, there's passion in this.
Oh yeah.
Great. And so, but it's also part of sort of to a certain degree. I mean, it's a bit of a mill, right? They're putting out a lot of movies.
Yeah.
This particular director didn't put out that many, honestly. So it's interesting. I'd love, we sort of did a certain dive into like how this was made and it's sort of the immediate information. But it is like I am curious, like how do we get to the point where we're going like, yeah, let's definitely make this pretty new wavy.
Yeah, and we mentioned on the previous episode too. We were looking into like not how, but when would these films, Tokyo Drifter or this one, when were they first seen by Western audiences, specifically here in the United States, but also these directors working here at Nikatsu Productions. I don't know if they were traveling to film festivals. Like, I don't get the impression that this movie was like going out to film festivals when it came out. So I'm curious what the viewing habits were. So I'm asking about film festivals because I think if you're out at a film festival, maybe you would have seen like some Italian, spaghetti westerns. Well, I guess that wouldn't be film festivals, but like the French New Wave or maybe like the Polish New School or something. You would have seen the experimentation going on in other film movements of the time period, or those may have just been played in Japanese theaters, and I'm just haven't found documentation of that. But cinema is worldwide, and Japanese society did have plenty of like foreign films coming into their cinemas. So I don't think Nomura here is like inventing the same things that the French New Wave and the Italians are doing with spaghetti westerns. It's clear he's seen them and is appreciating them. Is like, ooh, that would be really fun. How about if we do this? How about if we try that?
Right.
So it's kind of which makes it kind of a fun thing to. Again, like I said, like watch as a film geek, we're like, ooh, all right, now we're doing a spaghetti western shootout. Okay, now we're doing a very French New Wave edited kind of flirtation scene or romantic subplot.
But part of it is with the dynamism that comes from an industry that's used to doing sword fights. So like the final showdown, I mean, part of it is very different than your average spaghetti western. I mean, we should describe it. I mean, we can describe it, but here's the average spaghetti western showdown because it's incredibly mobile and dynamic in a lot of ways. I mean, I don't want to say no spaghetti western showdowns do that. And I mean, something like Django is certainly not, like just a duel, but I don't know. It feels like they're actually better at shooting action than. I mean, I'm not saying that the Italians are bad at shooting action, but it actually, if anything, Japan is actually better at it, and you can feel that here.
Well, oddly enough, speaking of shooting it, same cinematographer as Tokyo Drifter on this one. I don't know what that necessarily means, but I was like, okay, he's a solid at a shootout. Yeah, so once the deal is struck, where it's just going to be Joe Shishido versus now both crime families, whose one has a new boss because one was executed, and his former boss are in a bulletproof car with some of their henchmen, and they are, or specifically the glass is bulletproof, and they are going to watch at this landfill, which really just looks like a barren kind of like desert. It's all flat. Like it's not, don't picture any garbage. It's all flat, kind of barren wasteland. While some other henchmen who are outside the car are going to take out Joe Shishido. And the interesting part of, one of the interesting parts of this film I like is the procedural aspect of it. Just to flash back to the opening scene, like we mentioned, when he's going and does the hit job that kicks off this whole plot, we get a very kind of methodical procedural on how he does it. Like he puts the gun together, he gets the hotel room, he's looking at, like he gets everything set up perfectly, so you know where he's at, you know where he's aiming. It's very much, I don't know, it was giving me kind of maybe even like Michael Mann vibes.
Yeah,
a little bit. This passionate detachment. You have to be able to let stuff go. I think he even says at one point, if you want to stay alive, don't get too attached to your guns, to his protege, where it's like, yeah, you got to be able to walk away from all this stuff because you don't get caught. There's just like zero sentimentality going on here.
Except for his attachment to his partner and so forth, right? But so that's his sort of noirishness. But no, the Michael Mann thing is, the skilled professional, right? He has a fetish for skilled professional.
Yeah.
And so part of it is Joe Shishido as a hitman is, kind of immaculate professional,
right?
To a degree, though. I mean, we were sort of talking about the initial hit is a little brazen, but I think that's the vibe. And he's someone who prepares and thinks through.
Right. A preparation and like an appreciation for the craft of whatever he's doing. Happens to be killing people, but he's very, very, very good at that. So it's not just that we have a shootout scene here at the end of this spaghetti Western Yakuza Noir with a touch of French New Wave in there. You get to see Joe Shishido going and scoping out the competition. So he's actually at the former boss's house, seeing like the bulletproof car and watching them try out different guns on the car to show how impervious to bullets it is. And he's like, okay, well, this is what I'm up against. And then we get to see Joe Shishido on his own, what we don't maybe necessarily know exactly what he's doing, but he's putting together all of the, again, speaking to this professionalism, he's putting together all of the equipment, aka weapons and a bomb that he's going to need in order to get through the final shootout. We don't necessarily know what his plan is, but we see him prepping all of this stuff, like building from scratch a bomb with magnets on it for reasons we don't know at the time.
I mean, that invokes the Michael Mann-ness long before Michael Mann, but it also, this is an extremely spaghetti Western thing, right? So gadgetry, specialized weapons. The other side has their gadget, which is basically a bulletproof car, and also they have a lot of goons. And so he's setting up gadgets to counter. And this feels extremely spaghetti Western.
Yeah.
And so keep going. So he sits and he prepares the magnet and so forth. We don't really know why. He digs a little hole.
Yeah, once he's out in like the wasteland, the landfill area, he digs this hole, which I was like, wait, is he going to bury the bomb here? He's not explaining it because there's nobody else around, and why would you? We're going to see how it all plays out eventually. And in my head, once he got out of the hole, once the hole was like done, I was like, he just dug a grave?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, as long as a coffin. I was like, okay. And then pretty much as soon as the hole's completed, there's hitmen, the goons, as you said, are opening fire. So we get some standard shootout stuff. There's some good gunplay. The editing is so skillful because it gives you the perspective of the bosses that are in the car, and then also the goons that have the guns that are trying to take out Joe Shishido. And you also get him just, taking out all the goons.
You've got this windswept space. I mean, it's a landfill technically, but it's all, covered in dirt. You have this windswept space, but the actual shootout is a lot of motion and dynamism. I mean, he's running and shooting a lot to the side, and that reminds me to a certain degree of like, the sword work. It also reminds me, this is part of what I was saying about like the shooting and the action is very is dynamic and sort of not different than what we would see, let's say, in an average spaghetti western.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't surprise me that this is the same, the same person shooting this as the last movie we watched.
Oh, it's Tokyo Drifter. Yeah, there's even, I think, a scene, because there's a scene in Tokyo Drifter where he tosses the gun in the air and then like rolls away or something and then catches it and then shoots somebody. And I think there's another like toss the gun, catch it, kill somebody in this one too. That's how cool these characters are.
Yeah.
And then I guess we should say, obviously, well, not obviously, it's kind of a twist from film noir because we have a main character who presumably lives here in this one. And he does that by shootout style, takes out all of the goons that are outside the car, and then it's left to the bosses and the couple of henchmen that are in the car, window down with a gun out the window, try to shoot at Joe Shishido. He does take a couple hits, so that's why it's presumably lives, but he's just injured. Right as the car is about to run him down, we get to see the reason why he dug the hole in the first place. He jumps right in the hole. Perfect fit for him. Car goes right over top of him at the very last second. And those magnets he put on the bomb, guess what those are for? Right on that car.
Yep.
Awesome.
Because you've scoped them out already. And they blow up and he walks away.
Pretty spectacular blow up, too. I mean, this is a black and white film, but you could just, like, it's a massive blow up and you can just feel the heat. It is expertly filmed and expertly done stunt wise. He just goes over, takes a look. And he's like, all right, man. And then walks off. Couldn't be more just walking into the sunset, kind of spaghetti western style.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's a fantastic and dynamic ending. And, part of it is we've seen action previously in the movie, but I don't think we haven't seen anything like this. So it's it's a bit of a tonal shift, but not in a way that's disjointed.
I think it's an effective build because you see so much of the prep from both sides going into it. And you're like, it builds your like, oh, how is he going to do this?
Right. It builds tension.
Yeah. It also, there is a scene, just speaking to action real quick. There's a scene earlier in the movie. I wrote in my notes a car chase, but I don't think that's the right word for it. We don't really see, or I haven't seen in the ones I've seen so far of those, like Yakuza Noir, some of the Japanese noir, there's not a lot of car chase scenes. I don't know if that's a budget restriction or they weren't able, I don't know if there's like different permits than how it would work if you're trying to shoot a car chase scene in America. Well, actually, I guess America in the 60s, you're not shooting, late 60s, you get Bullet and eventually French Connection and things, but you get a lot of rear projection and kind of dumb car chases in the mid 60s here in Hollywood as well. But there is like a light car chase scene earlier in the film, but by far it's clearly building all to this giant set piece action climax.
Right. I mean, honestly, that's what I mean is like, I don't, do American movies at this point do action like this? No, they just don't. Mm-mm. They can have stunning scenes, but like it's not this dynamic. And I think, the classic spaghetti westerns are very dynamic, but in a different way. The capacity for motion, it's fantastic.
Right. Well, also keep in mind too, that you have, let me back up on that comment, I guess. In 1967, you do have like Bonnie and Clyde coming out here in America. And that's a watershed for shootouts and guns and violence because they weren't shooting movies like that in Hollywood up until Bonnie and Clyde did it. And also, if you check the dates, I think we mentioned it, it's been a while on the show, but the dates for the traditional like peak spaghetti westerns with Clint Eastwood, the Dollars trilogy, those all came out in America to see in 67, even though the dates of their production are before that. They didn't hit the States here. And people are like, wait, whoa, what? So 67 really was kind of like a watershed year in American cinema for the type of stuff that you see in Tokyo Drifter in 66. And specifically here, Colt is My Passport also in 67. So the Japanese were doing it first. Although I guess we're also saying that it's inspired by spaghetti westerns. So really,
I think it is, but part of it, we said this when we talked about the Japanese New Wave before. They're absorbing things from other places, but they're also, it's very much their own thing. And there's elements of spaghetti western, but I don't think this would have been made in other places.
Mm-mm.
I could be wrong, but I can't really think of it. This is before Hong Kong, but it's right when the sort of Hong Kong that we know. I mean, the Shaw brothers haven't really come yet, and Hong Kong is just actually, I mean, to a certain degree, Taiwan actually. I'm gonna, so like something like, so King Hugh is doing like Dragon Inn like right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's in
Interesting. Okay.
'67, and I'm not an expert on this, but you feel like that's sort of creating within the sort of Chinese Chinese sphere, basically. So Hong Kong,
Mhm.
at that point, Hong Kong and Taiwan, and eventually the mainland, but not for a while. They're creating that film language, and they're taking sort of American stunts, and and they're and Peking opera. But I know, I mean, at least from some of the things they're also learning from Japanese samurai movies in terms of how to shoot sword fights and so forth.
Right, right. To be fair, though, too, like Shaw Brothers, like because I just recently watched One Armed Swordsman. That's '67, and was reading up on them. I mean, they started off, I think, in like the 20s.
Right.
But like you said, yeah, they're doing the sword play the way this is doing gunplay.
Right, and they're just starting.
They just started, yes, exactly.
Yeah, so King Hugh is just starting. The Shaw brothers are just starting with This is a period where, like, I think a formative period for like what modern action is going to be.
Yes, exactly.
As the influence flowing from East Asia, obviously not a one-way street.
Well, also, influence is a good note here, possibly even to wrap up on as well. When we're referencing like spaghetti westerns and the French New Wave and certain things like that, this isn't saying like, oh, they're just copying these trends that are out there. Like, this is a wholly unique, also just kick-ass piece of filmmaking. It's using world cinema language to tell a much more dynamic story coming out of a genre that was already well established, specifically within Nikatsu as a studio, but that was not the only studio making these in Japan, and I think that's why some of these have lasted or stood the test of time, especially from an American audience. I assume, but probably also a worldwide audience. This one or Tokyo Drifter, or Branded to Kill. Like there's certain ones of these that have like kind of risen above like all of the other ones that were being made. And I think it's because they are wholly original, even though they're using some of like the contemporary world cinema language at the time. So original, in fact, that like the few of these that I've watched now is like, well, these are clearly a huge influence up through today with like Tarantino making movies. I mean, there's a direct line, obviously, even from like Shaw Brothers right to the Kill Bill movies.
And then osmosis into just action in general.
Yeah.
How we do it. I mean, I remember this is more watching Suzuki, but I think this as well. You couldn't help think of something like John Wick. And that's not necessarily just in the shooting of the action, because that's influenced by Hong Kong, it's influenced by a lot of things, but a lot of the sort of society of criminals, right? Mm-hmm. That's more the Suzuki we've talked about previously, but I think it's still in this one as well to a certain degree.
To be fair, you see John Wick in everything. We talk about the Before trilogy, and you're like, it actually is kind of like in John Wick.
True. I mean, I'm not wrong,
but. Well, then, any final thoughts on Colt is My Passport, Isaac, or even how it may have? I guess we kind of already mentioned some overlap with Tokyo Drifter and some of the other stuff that they were putting out. But
I think this is a fantastic movie. It makes me really happy. It's interesting because we did sort of a boilerplate political analysis of this and the previous one, but I feel like in some ways, the mission of this podcast is both to talk about film, but also the politics of it. And I feel like in a certain sense, I haven't been able to totally pull that off with these. We've certainly dug in a bit, but nothing, deeply unique in either of them in a political sense.
Well, capturing a moment.
It's certainly capturing a moment. It's interesting when you watch sort of classic American noir. It's just as sort of boilerplated in terms of what the critique is going to be, but I feel like I can sort of catch a little bit more. It's been interesting going through these because I felt they're sort of a test of my ability to maintain the format.
Oh, the format of this show?
Of the show, and I hope we've succeeded.
I think we covered a lot more than you're giving us credit for, or giving yourself credit for, because there's also the whole dynamic here, which maybe is more like economic maybe than political, but I think there's pretty clear overlap there, where Suzuki was having success with his like rebellion youth movies, but then also the Yakuza stuff. He was allowed to get as crazy as he got up to Branded to Kill when they were like, all right, now you're too crazy, get the fuck out of here, and gets fired. Versus someone like Nomura here doing Colt is My Passport, where he wasn't finding box office success enough that a studio is going to like keep him around and let him just keep going with stuff. So he ends up moving into TV.
Right.
And they're both looking at pretty similar themes within like the official Yakuza subgenre there. I mean, I would vote for Joe Shishido as more charismatic than Tetsuya that we talked about during Tokyo Drifter. So for me, that would have been like the bigger draw at the box office. But you win some, you lose some.
I mean, I think I like Tetsuya a lot. I think he's great in that role, but Joe Shishido is just, you watch him and it does feel like a legend, right? Like it feels like it's just a person, just one of those figures.
Ooh, if only you get that awesome baby blue suit onto Joe Shishido from Tokyo Drifter.
So part of it is, I think that, part of it, he's not a pretty boy, and Tetsuya is. And I think those suits work really well with someone who's like, I mean, he's almost baby-faced, right, Tetsuya?
I think Joe Shishido beats him out in the baby face category. Come on. I mean, he has a surgically enhanced baby face.
But baby face meaning he looks young,
Right.
He's handsome and young, whereas Shishido kind of just looks weird.
He has more of like a brooding, I guess, kind of vibe to it. And also, like we mentioned on the previous one, Tetsuya has got more like that Elvis vibe than, more. I think Joe Shishido's got more of like the Steve McQueen vibe.
Yeah.
Joe Shishido's not walking around singing his own theme song.
No.
He's barely talking.
No. He does not look like somebody who's actually a pop star.
Right. So, but I think it's an interesting comparison having watched these like so close together. Two different directors having same basically levels of freedom, it seems like, to craft a story that they're making uniquely their own based on their instincts, but also trends they see in cinema and I think some pretty successful experimentation as far as form and style goes with both of them.
Right. I mean, extremely successful and fascinating, which is, I think, the first time we covered this during the summer of the 60s, we were just sort of stunned. And I think we continue to be stunned by like what Japan, as just an overall film industry, was doing in the 60s.
Right. Because it's not like, hey, this is successful, everybody copied that. And I'm sure those films are out there. I just haven't even seen them or they're not available to me. But the ones that we're seeing, we're like, well, that's actually kind of, it's almost like they're having conversations with each other as far as like kind of style and aesthetics go.
It's such a, I mean, I think that's always true. But since you're seeing, especially in the United States, you're seeing a major style transition, the conversation is so much clearer, right? You're having like major changes in style, globally to a certain degree.
Yeah.
And so that means that the conversation like comes through all the better,
Right. Well, also we were looking at the same genre. Like we weren't looking at like a period drama and then Yakuza Noir and then a musical. Like that's wildly different. We were looking at just within one genre of film too. And to see that kind of variety and experimentation and successful experimentation within like a 1 year time span is awesome.
Yeah. It's really, I mean, it's just a cluster of just like, I mean, that's just it. That's sort of what I meant about it. It's like, here's this director who hasn't really put out very much and we don't really, we barely sort of notice him. And here he is coming out with, and it may have a lot to do with the DP as well, right? Like it may have a lot to do with who's shooting and who,
sure.
I mean, that's there. But like, the first thing you want to do is pour on these particular influences. Like there's so much more artistic intensity because it also has commercial value too. But there's so much more artistic, like, effort in a movie like this that should be just like a throwaway.
Right. And I mean, that's from the studio's perspective. These were like, you're making all these movies. You're like, oh yeah, this will hit. We need some more Yakuza ones. We need some more, youth rebellion movies. We need some musicals. We need some period dramas. Okay. We got the Yakuza stuff covered. Those guys are doing it over there. Next.
Yeah.
Well, Isaac, I'm venturing a guess because I haven't seen it. I feel like with our next film that we're going to be discussing, you'll feel a little bit better about getting some politics out of the story.
Yeah.
So?
I think I will. I mean, to be clear, we could have chosen, more political noirs, but I think we really wanted to do these two for stylistic purposes.
It's not always 50-50. Sometimes it's not 50% politics, 50% cinema. Sometimes it's a little bit more cinema. Sometimes it's a little bit more politics.
But
we do what we can.
Next one, definitely we will. We are doing our annual Christmas special by choosing one of my favorite Christmas movies, right?
I was trying to think of one real quick. Is this going to be, well, since we're both from Cleveland, is this going to be A Christmas Story?
Absolutely not. Next, got any other guesses?
I'm going to go with Elf. The Political Economy of Elf.
That would be fascinating, and maybe we should do that someday. But nope, actually, we're sticking with Japan, and we are going to do 1962's Harikari by Kobayashi, one of the great Japanese directors of the period, and someone who always challenged authority and the failings of Japan's 20th century governments. There's nothing like a Christmas with disembowelments. Let's put it that way.
Are we going to finally get some honor here in this movie?
It's interesting because this is a movie about honor, and it's about the meaning of honor and how it's used systemically. Because maybe honor is bullshit, but that's a story for another episode of this podcast.
Indeed. I'm looking quite forward to this because I don't think I've ever seen any of his films.
You've never seen it? You've never seen
Qui-Gon?
Yeah.
Nope. Human Condition Part 1, 2, or 3? Nope.
Oh man, Human Condition. God, I just need to drop out of grad school to watch that movie. I mean, what is it, like 20 hours or something?
It's probably something like that. I think, dude, there's one I think I checked out Samurai Rebellion when I was in film school because we had a tech the tech room had a whole bunch of movies in there. I don't think I ever watched it though. I would just take out a stack every weekend just to I'm gonna get through all of these, and I'd only get through like 5 or 6. But
I mean, Samurai Rebellion is good. I mean, it's got Toshiro Mifune. I probably should watch it again. I was
also a teenager in college, and when you see a movie called Samurai Rebellion with like a fucking Mifune on the poster or on the VHS cover, and then a blood splatter, I'm gonna check that one out.
Right. I mean, who among us would not? But I think this is his masterpiece. Probably, I don't know. I think he's one of these people with a lot of them.
That's how I've always heard him. Yeah.
I mean, he's just he's up there with the big ones, and this might be my favorite samurai movie. Period.
Interesting.
This is one of the ones that helped me to love cinema long before I took about 10 years ago when I started taking the deep plunge and just watching lots and lots of movies. This is one I watched as a teenager. I probably saw it at the Cleveland Cinematheque.
Nice.
And it just really captured me, and I've been really looking forward to doing it. So I want to make it Christmas themed. So,
So we'll do it.
Yes.
But before we fully sign off, we always like to remind folks to be sure and rate and review the show in whatever podcast app you are using. And if you do enjoy the show or a particular episode, tell a friend or two about that one. We're also up and running on the usual social medias. There's a bunch of links in the show notes. So wherever you're listening to this at, just click on any of those and it'll take you away. And until next time, I'm Aaron.
And I'm Isaac. All I just want to say is, keep your eye on the dollar. Don't let the bosses catch you, get you down. Unionize, strike. And if you're a railroad worker out there, especially, we're in absolute solidarity with you right now as you face Congress basically shutting down your ability to strike, which of course has been true since the early 20th century, over 100 years. They're under special legislation. We're very, very close to a railroad strike, basically over railroad workers having sick days at all. The House of Representatives have just basically prevented them from striking in one, including a number of members of the House who call themselves socialists. Then, they've also passed a bill that gives them 7 days of sick leave. They've asked for 2. I mean, considering, or I think 15 days originally, considering, COVID, you're not going to be over COVID in 7 days. So it's nice of Congress to do that, but it's bullshit, and it really should be up to workers when they withhold their labor. If you don't want a rail strike that will disrupt our entire economy, then give them what they need. And if the rail system can't take people taking 2 weeks to get sick, then we have a real problem with our infrastructure, and that should be fixed. And maybe the private sector isn't really up to doing it. Just a thought. Maybe there's some more systemic problems. Be careful of railroad bosses and Congresses that facilitate them. Yeah. See you next time.